The first time I saw him cry, he was laughing. The crowd at the graduation bonfire roared with energy, the music shaking the ground, but behind that smoke and noise, his smile broke for just a second, like glass catching firelight before it shatters. Tyler Bennett wasn't the kind of guy anyone imagined breaking. He was the star of the track team, the one who carried everyone's confidence like a trophy. When he walked into a room, people straightened up, like the air itself wanted to impress him. But I knew better. I'd seen the way his hands trembled before a race, the way he bit the inside of his cheek when he thought no one was watching. And that night, when he finally found me near the lake, away from the crowd, he looked like a boy who had been running his whole life and finally reached the end of the road. "Eli," he said, his voice rough, almost breaking, "I can't keep pretending anymore." The bonfire crackled in the distance. I could still hear people laughing, shouting his name, calling him back. The golden boy, their hero. But here, in the shadows, his shoulders shook, his breath uneven. He looked at me with eyes that pleaded for something he'd never asked for before. "What are you pretending about?" I asked quietly. He hesitated. Then he whispered, "Everything." That word carried years of weight, the pressure of being perfect, of living up to every expectation, of loving in silence. Tyler sat down on the cold grass, his fingers pulling at the blades like he needed to hold on to something real. I sat next to him, close enough to feel the warmth from his body but far enough to let him choose if he wanted to close that distance. He didn't. Not yet. "I hate that they all think I'm fearless," he said. "I hate that I can't tell them that I'm scared. That sometimes I don't even know who I am anymore." The way his voice cracked on that last word felt like a confession, not just of fear, but of longing. "Then stop pretending," I said. He turned to look at me, eyes glistening under the faint light. "You make it sound easy." "It's not," I admitted. "But it's real." Silence stretched between us, filled with the sound of the wind and distant music. Then he asked, almost in a whisper, "Have you ever felt like you're living someone else's life?" I nodded. "Every day until I met you." For the first time, his lips curved into something soft. Not the practiced grin he gave everyone, but a quiet, trembling smile that belonged only to him. He exhaled, long and shaky, and leaned back, his head tilting toward the stars. "Sometimes I wish I could just disappear," he murmured. "Start somewhere new. Be who I really am without worrying about what people would say." "You could," I said gently. "You don't have to disappear to be free, Tyler. You just have to stop hiding." He laughed bitterly. "That's easy for you to say. You're brave enough to be yourself." "Brave," I echoed. "I'm terrified most of the time." He looked at me and I held his gaze. For a moment, the night around us faded. No music, no cheers, no expectations. Just two people, both afraid, both trying to find their place in a world that demanded they wear masks. Then he reached out, fingers brushing mine, hesitant but deliberate. The contact sent a jolt through me, not from surprise, but from the realization that he was finally letting go of something, maybe the version of himself he thought he had to be. When his hand stayed there, resting on top of mine, neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. That was the night I realized courage wasn't about standing tall in front of everyone. Sometimes it was about sitting quietly in the dark, holding someone's hand, and letting yourself be seen. The weeks that followed were quieter, but something between us had shifted. Tyler still smiled for the cameras, still joked with his friends, still led the team through their last practices before summer. But when we were alone, his walls came down piece by piece. We'd meet after school at the old railway bridge, the one that crossed the small river behind town. It wasn't a secret spot, not really, but it felt like our world. The bridge was rusted, the planks worn smooth by decades of feet. But when we sat there, legs hanging over the edge, everything else disappeared. Sometimes he'd talk, sometimes he'd just sit in silence, the wind tugging at his hair. I learned that silence with him wasn't empty. It was a language of its own. He told me about his father, the former Marine who believed emotions were weaknesses to be beaten out of boys. About his mother, who smiled through everything but never asked if he was happy. About the college scholarship waiting for him at Stanford, the one he didn't even want. "What do you want, then?" I asked one afternoon. He looked at me, eyes distant. "I want to stop feeling like I owe everyone my life." That answer sat heavy between us. When I reached out and touched his shoulder, he didn't flinch this time. He leaned into the touch, his head dropping just slightly, and I realized how long he'd been starving for softness. We started spending more time together. Late-night drives to nowhere, sharing songs that never made the radio, quiet mornings at the diner before anyone else was awake. It felt dangerous, the way every glance lasted a little too long. Every brush of skin lingered a heartbeat more than it should, but it also felt inevitable. One evening, after a thunderstorm, we ended up at the lake again. The air was heavy with the scent of rain, and the sky glowed faintly pink over the water. Tyler stood at the edge, hands in his pockets, staring out like he was waiting for something to rise from beneath the surface. "I used to come here as a kid," he said. "My dad would throw me in and tell me to swim back if I wanted to live. Said it would make me strong." I felt something twist in my chest. "Did it?" I asked softly. He smiled, not the kind of smile that reaches the eyes, but the kind that hides a wound. It made me good at pretending. I walked closer until I stood beside him. The air between us was warm, charged with things unspoken. "You don't have to pretend with me," I said. He turned to face me then, rain still dripping from his hair, his eyes searching mine. For a long moment he didn't say anything. Then, slowly he took my face in his hands. "I don't know how to stop," he whispered. "Then let me help you," I said. Something broke inside him, quietly, beautifully. His hands trembled, but he didn't pull away. When he leaned in, our foreheads touched first, and then his lips brushed mine. Tentative, afraid, and yet full of everything he had been holding back for years. The kiss wasn't perfect. It wasn't practiced. It was raw, uncertain, real. When we finally pulled apart, he looked at me with tears he didn't bother to hide. "I've never been more scared," he said. I smiled, brushing my thumb along his jaw. "That's how you know it's real." We stood there as the sun slipped below the horizon, our reflections rippling on the dark water. For the first time, Tyler didn't look like the invincible boy everyone worshipped. He looked human, and that, somehow, made him more beautiful than ever. But the world wasn't ready for us. Not yet. Rumors started the following week. Whispers in the locker room, sideways glances in the cafeteria. Someone must have seen us at the lake. Tyler laughed it off in public, but I could see the panic in his eyes every time someone joked. "You and Eli seem close, huh?" He'd grin, say something clever, and everyone would laugh. But later, when we were alone, he'd sit with his head in his hands, the weight of their expectations pressing down again. "I can't lose everything," he said one night, voice trembling. "Not my team, not my scholarship, not my family." I wanted to tell him love was worth it, but I also knew what it meant to live with fear, to hide the best part of yourself because the world wasn't kind enough to understand. "So instead," I said quietly, "you won't lose me." He looked at me, eyes glassy, and whispered, "That's what I'm afraid of." By the end of summer, the air between us had changed. He still smiled when he saw me, still touched my hand when no one was looking. But there was a tension now, a quiet desperation underneath it all. He was leaving for college in a month. I was staying behind. And though we never said it, both of us knew we were running out of time. The last week of August felt like a countdown neither of us wanted to start. Every place we went together, the bridge, the diner, the empty football field at night, became a memory we were already mourning. He tried to keep things light, cracking jokes, talking about college as if it was just another race to win. But I could see the fear in his eyes whenever he looked at me too long. It wasn't just fear of losing me. It was fear of facing himself without the shield of this town, this image, this life he'd spent years building. One night, 3 days before he was supposed to leave, he showed up at my door. His hair was messy, his eyes red. He didn't say anything, just stood there, trembling slightly, until I stepped aside and let him in. "Tyler," I asked softly. He swallowed hard, his voice barely above a whisper. "My dad found out." The words hit me like cold water. "How?" He ran a hand through his hair, pacing the small living room. "Someone sent him pictures of us at the lake." I felt my chest tighten. "Did he?" "He didn't yell," Tyler interrupted. "He didn't have to. He just looked at me like I was a stranger, like I was something broken." He stopped pacing and faced me, his eyes full of panic and hurt. "He said I'd ruin everything if I didn't get my act together, that I'd embarrass the family, lose my scholarship, throw away my future for a mistake." "A mistake?" I echoed, my voice shaking. "Is that what you think we are?" He froze. The silence stretched painfully long before he finally spoke. "No. God, no. But I don't know how to make them understand. I don't even know how to breathe right now." I wanted to tell him it would be okay, that love would be enough to fix this, but I wasn't naive. I knew how people like his father saw the world. I knew what it meant to be different in a town that worshipped perfection. "Come here," I whispered. He did, and when he fell into my arms, he didn't try to be strong. His body shook, his breath coming in ragged gasps against my shoulder. I held him tighter, feeling every tremor, every ounce of pain he had been carrying alone. For hours we stayed like that, two boys against the world, clinging to the small, fragile space where we were safe. When he finally pulled back, his voice was raw. "I wish I could stay here forever." "Then do," I said without thinking. He smiled sadly. "You know I can't." I knew. He had dreams to chase, expectations to fulfill, a family name to uphold. And yet, looking at him then, I saw someone who was slowly realizing that none of those things would ever make him feel whole. "Promise me something," I said quietly. "When you leave, don't go back to hiding. Not from them, not from me, not from yourself." He nodded, his eyes shining with tears. "I promise." We spent that night talking about everything. Our fears, our hopes, the lives we wished we could build. We didn't sleep. We didn't need to. It was enough to exist together, hearts beating in the same rhythm for what might be the last time. At sunrise, he kissed me like it was both a beginning and an ending. "I'll write to you," he said. "Then I'll write back." He smiled, the real kind this time. "You always know how to make things sound simple." "Maybe that's what love is," I said softly. "Simple, even when the world tries to make it complicated." And then he left. The first few weeks without him felt like walking through a house that had been emptied of air. Everything reminded me of him. The echo of laughter at the diner, the scuff marks on the bridge railing, the late summer sunsets we used to chase in his truck. He called sometimes. Short conversations, whispered between classes or in the quiet of his dorm room. He sounded different, older, tired, but still trying. "I can't talk long," he'd say. "My roommate's here." "It's okay," I'd reply. "I just wanted to hear your voice." Sometimes he'd send me pictures, the campus fountain, his running shoes, the view from his window. Ordinary things, but they felt like proof he still existed somewhere out there, thinking of me. But then the calls became less frequent, the messages shorter. Weeks passed. And one day, nothing came at all. I tried not to panic. I told myself he was busy, adjusting, learning to survive in a new world. But the silence was heavy, and I could feel something slipping away. Not love, but connection. Then, a month later, a letter arrived. It was short. No return address, just his handwriting. Eli. I'm sorry. I can't do this right now. I thought I was ready to be honest, but I'm not. Everything's falling apart here. I need time to figure out who I am. Away from you, away from everything. Please understand. Tyler. I read it over and over until the paper blurred. He hadn't said goodbye, but he hadn't said he'd come back either. Autumn came, and with it, distance. I threw myself into work, school, anything that could fill the silence. But no matter how much time passed, I couldn't forget the look in his eyes that night by the lake, the way fear and love had lived side by side. A year later, I graduated. He didn't come back for it. 2 years later, I heard he'd broken records at Stanford. They called him the unstoppable Bennett, the golden boy again, perfect, fearless, untouchable. But I knew better. Still, I stayed silent. I didn't want to be a ghost from his past, a reminder of the boy he used to be. Then one night I got a message. No name, just a number I didn't recognize. I'm in town. Can we talk? My heart stopped. I didn't need to ask who it was. He was waiting at the same lake where it all began. The years had changed him, broader shoulders, sharper jawline, a quiet gravity that came from carrying too much. But his eyes, they were still the same. He smiled when he saw me. You cut your hair. You grew up, I said. For a moment, neither of us knew what to do. Then he stepped closer, the space between us shrinking until the air felt heavy again. I wanted to come back sooner, he said, but I was scared. Of what? Of you seeing that I became everything I swore I wouldn't. I searched his face, the familiar lines now etched deeper by time. And what's that? A version of myself that everyone loves, except me. The honesty in his voice cut deeper than any goodbye could have. He sat down on the grass just like that night years ago, and I joined him. The lake shimmered under the moonlight, quiet, knowing. I thought if I stayed strong, if I kept winning, it would make the rest of it go away, he said. But every time they cheered, I just felt emptier, like I was living someone else's dream. I looked at him gently. So why come back? He turned to me, his expression fragile. Because the only time I ever felt real was with you. The words hung there, trembling in the night air. He reached into his jacket and pulled out something small, the letter I had sent him after his silence. The one that had never been answered. I kept it, he said quietly. Read it 1,000 times. You said you'd wait, even if I couldn't promise when I'd come back. I didn't know if you'd ever read it, I whispered. I did. Every word. He swallowed hard. I wanted to believe I could be that brave. And now I think I finally can. He took a deep breath, his voice unsteady. I told my dad last week. About us. About who I am. My breath caught. How did he take it? He didn't say much, just walked out of the room. But I didn't chase after him this time. A small, sad smile flickered across his face. For once, I didn't feel like the one who had to apologize. Pride and ache rose together in my chest. I'm proud of you, Tyler. He looked at me, his eyes softening. I'm proud of me too, because I'm finally not pretending anymore. The wind rustled through the trees, and for a long moment we just sat there. Two people who had once been afraid to be seen, now sitting fully in the open. He leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper. Do you still think love can be simple? I smiled. No, but I still think it's worth it. And when he kissed me this time, there was no fear, no hesitation. Just the quiet certainty of something real. Something that had survived distance, silence, and years of pretending. When we pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine. I spent so long trying to be brave for everyone else, he said. But with you, I finally learned what bravery really means. What's that? I asked. Letting someone see you. All of you. I looked at him, at the boy who once hid behind a smile and the man who now stood unguarded before me, and felt the truth of it settle deep in my bones. The lake rippled gently under the moonlight. Somewhere far off, A train passed, its sound echoing across the quiet night. He reached for my hand, and I took it. The same hand that had once trembled in fear now held mine with quiet strength. Maybe we had been broken, maybe we still were, but for the first time we weren't pretending to be whole. And somehow that felt like the bravest thing in the world. Months later, I stood in the stands at a national track meet, watching him take his mark. The crowd chanted his name, thousands of voices echoing through the stadium. He glanced up once, just once, and found me. For a heartbeat, the noise disappeared. It was just us again. The lake, the laughter, the years between us folding into a single unspoken truth. Then he smiled. Not the practiced grin, but that quiet, trembling smile that belonged only to him, and the gun went off. He ran like he was finally free. When he crossed the finish line, he didn't raise his arms in victory. He just looked up at the sky, closed his eyes, and exhaled. Later, when he found me outside the stadium, he didn't say a word. He didn't need to. I could see it in his face. Peace. He had spent years acting brave in front of everyone. But with me, he had finally let his walls fall. And in that moment, I knew love hadn't saved him. It had simply given him permission to save himself. It's been 5 years since that night by the lake, the night he came back. Sometimes I still dream about it. The smell of wet grass, the way the moonlight touched his face, the sound of his voice when he said, "I'm done pretending." It doesn't haunt me anymore. It just reminds me of where everything began. Tyler and I moved to Portland 2 years ago. It wasn't planned. It never is with him. He had just finished his last season as a professional athlete, and I was working as a freelance photographer. One morning, he woke up, looked out the window and said, "I want to live somewhere that doesn't know who I was." So we packed our lives into 2 cars and left. No ceremony, no goodbye posts online. Just us and the road. Now we rent a small apartment overlooking the river. It's nothing fancy. Chipped paint, an old wooden balcony that creaks when you lean on it, but it's ours. On weekends, we walk to the farmer's market. He still wears his baseball cap low out of habit, though no one here knows his name. Sometimes kids recognize him from old highlight reels online, and he smiles, takes a picture, and then goes right back to buying tomatoes. He told me once, "I don't miss who I was, but I miss not knowing who I'd become." I understood, because in some way we were both still learning. The first year together wasn't easy. For all his progress, there were days when he'd retreat, not out of shame but fear. He'd wake up before dawn, run until his lungs burned, chasing silence like it was something he owed himself. I'd find him afterward sitting by the river, sweat dripping, eyes distant. One morning, I sat beside him and said, "You don't have to prove you're strong anymore." He didn't look at me. "I'm not trying to prove it," he said. "I'm just trying to remember who I am without the noise." So I stopped trying to fix it. I learned to sit beside him in the quiet, to let him take his time. Because love isn't a cure. It's a companion. He started painting that year. It was almost funny. The boy who used to run from feelings now spent hours trying to capture them in color. His hands, once made for racing, now moved slow and deliberate, smearing shades of blue and gray across canvas. I'd watch him sometimes, completely lost in it, and think, this is what healing looks like. He never painted people, until one day he did. It was us, sitting on the bridge from our hometown, legs dangling over the water. The light, the quiet, even the way our hands barely touched. When he showed it to me, I asked, "Why this moment?" He smiled faintly. "Because that's when I stopped being scared." We went back to our hometown once last winter. It had been years since he'd seen his parents. He said he wasn't sure if it was a good idea, but he wanted to stop running. When we pulled into the driveway, his father was standing on the porch, older, smaller somehow. He didn't say much, just nodded once and opened the door. Inside, the house felt like a time capsule. The same family photos, the same trophies on the shelf, the same silence that used to suffocate him. After dinner, his father asked to speak to him alone. I waited outside, pacing the porch, the cold biting at my skin. 30 minutes passed before the door opened again. Tyler stepped out, eyes glassy but calm. "He said he's trying," he murmured. "He doesn't understand everything, but he's trying." "Is that enough?" I asked. "For now," he said and smiled. That soft, unguarded smile I'd fallen for years ago. Later that night, as we drove back to our motel, he reached across the seat, took my hand and said, "You were right. Love doesn't fix everything, but it helps me face what's broken. Now our lives are quiet." I photograph people for a living, weddings, portraits, sometimes street shots. He teaches kids at a local community center, coaching track. He says he doesn't care if they win, only that they learn how to lose without hating themselves. There's one boy, Jaden, who reminds me of him. Talented, stubborn, afraid of being seen. One day, I watched Tyler kneel beside him after a fall on the track. "You okay?" he asked. Jaden sniffled. "Everyone saw me mess up." Tyler smiled. "Then they saw you get up too. That's what matters." When the boy ran again, Tyler looked over at me from across the field, that same knowing look he used to have when he was 17, the look that said, "I understand what it means to fall." That night, he came home tired but glowing. He dropped onto the couch and said, "You know what's weird? I think I like being the guy no one's cheering for." I laughed. "Yeah? Why's that?" "Because now, I get to decide what winning means." Sometimes we still drive back to the lake. Not the old one from our hometown, but a new one hidden up in the hills. It's become our place again. We bring coffee, sit by the water, watch the sky change colors. Last weekend, as the sun set, he turned to me and said, "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I never said anything that night? If I just kept pretending?" I thought about it. "You'd probably still be winning races, still smiling for everyone else." He nodded. "And still empty inside." He took my hand, fingers lacing through mine, warm and sure. I think about that sometimes, how one choice can change everything. Not just the big ones like leaving or staying. The small ones, looking at you that night, letting myself be seen. I smiled. That's all it ever takes, isn't it? One honest moment. He looked at me then, really looked, and the years between who we were and who we'd become melted away. "I love you," he said. Simple, steady, no hesitation. I laughed softly. "You've gotten good at saying that." He grinned. "I've had a good teacher." We sat there until the stars came out, listening to the quiet hum of water against the shore. It wasn't fireworks or chaos or grand confessions. It was peace. The kind that doesn't need to shout to be heard. And as the moon rose over the lake, I realized something. The boy who once acted brave in front of everyone had finally become the man who didn't need to act at all. He was free. We both were. Months later, I woke to the sound of rain on the roof. Tyler was already up, sitting